Okay, let's get into it. What do we need to do now? We've got a fine-looking application with a blank view controller and 2 buttons and a title on the nav bar. We got to have something to edit. We got to have something to add to. So that something is a list or a table view. A table view is just a table of items. It's typically, or it's always, a single column. Let us add that. We're going to do a couple things in the process of adding this thing. First off, we're going to click on our to-do list viewcontroller.xib, and we're going to add the table view itself to the view here, to the canvas. It's worth noting that a view controller, we mentioned before, we mentioned before that a view controller is a class that manages or controls a view. So if you option click on this guy, you can read more about that, but it's the view controller's primary job is to manage the life cycle of a view and inform us about significant events in the life cycle of a view so that we can kind of respond to that and interact with or handle interaction with the view. Let's see if we look at the documentation here. You can look at the documentation here. It looks kind of crazy, but the comments are actually really informative. And this is documentation and a full list of all of the methods and properties that are available on this class. And there are quite a few. So I recommend perusing that a little bit. What I want to note is if we are in here in any one of these functions and we say like self.view, it will start auto-populating. This is just to illustrate that view controller has a property that we can access that is called view. And we can interact with that programmatically at any time to manipulate that view, whether it's adding other views to it as subviews, it's changing the way that it looks, changing the way that it behaves. And that view is actually populated. That property or that variable on UI view controller is populated by our interface builder file, our XIB file. And you can basically think of anytime you create a code file paired with an XIB file, the XIB file is the interface that is going to be manipulated by the code file. So this view, in the case of a UI view controller, the view that you see here in the list of things that are contained in the interface builder file, and the view that we're like clicking on here and going to add this table view to, that is the .view property of our view controller. So when we add things to this, we are adding things to the .view, the view, self.view property of our view controller. I want you to expand this guy on the right-hand side. This, as we saw a little bit earlier, has a plethora of information that allow us to configure certain things about the elements on the canvas here. And I can unselect this, or I can select it and see the options. I can also cruise down here at the bottom. There are 4 options. I'm going to select this guy here, which is the object library. And this is basically a menu or a palette of interface elements that I can drag onto the canvas. Labels, buttons, different kinds of controls. And I can filter this at the bottom here. I can say UI table view. A couple things that come up. The first of which is what we want. So we want to add a table view, to our canvas. And I can do that by just clicking and dragging onto the view. I can release that there, and I've now positioned a table view as a subview of our view. And that is exposed via this hierarchy here. And it's also exposed because I can physically confirm that this is inside of the bounds of this view. Now, this guy is just floating there. And optimally, we want it to fill the view itself. We want it to be the exact same size as the view, and we want the top of the table view to hug the top of the view. And we're going to do that. We're going to set up that situation using a system called auto layout. This is a very powerful system which was introduced a few years ago that basically it's an engine that determines or allows views to determine how to lay themselves out with respect to their neighbors, their siblings, and their parents. And by extension, their descendants will lay themselves out as well. So it's a powerful system for us to set up relationships between views in our view hierarchy so that when the enclosing view might change size, right? It might get smaller or shorter or wider or something like that. Or, for example, when a user rotates the device. We might want to set up different relationships for different orientations, for different screen sizes, and so on. And so auto layout is a system that we can use to set up constraints that determine how the views lay themselves out when, in different configurations, basically. Very complex, but very powerful system, and we're going to take advantage of it. You can do incredibly sophisticated stuff with it, and the more you do with it, the more you get to know what it is capable of. We are going to do a couple things in order to set up some constraints on this view, on this table view, that direct it to fill the bounds of its super view. So first thing we're going to do is click the table view and go down here, and I want you to click this guy right here. Let's say 1, 2, 3. It's the third thingamajig over, and it's called the pin menu. And we want to say that this table view, there's 0 padding between the top, left, right, and bottom of its sides and the top, left, right, and bottom of its super view. So we're going to change these values here in these 4 fields to 0. So if you change those values, I want you to make sure that these little lines in here that look like I-beams are all red. So every value should be 0, and every line here that represents a constraint that we're about to create is going to be red. This checkbox here, constrained to margin, spacing to nearest neighbor, I want you to make sure that that is unchecked. If it's grayed out, even better. So we're basically saying, I want to add 4 constraints to this view, and you can look at the square in here as representing our table view, the view that we are about to constrain. And these guys here represent spacing to its nearest neighbor, which in this case is its super view. So if you look at the right-hand side of your table view, and you just kind of cruise to the right over this plane, the first thing that it hits, the first edge of something is going to be its super view right here. So when you set up a relationship on the right-hand side here, we're saying between these 2 elements, right, the right-hand side of the table view and the right-hand side of the super view, which is the first thing that we come to, we want there to be 0 space, 0 pixels. Same thing for these other guys, top, bottom, and left. So if you set this up with your numeric values and the red, you hit add 4 constraints at the bottom, you will see something great happen. Your constraints will be applied. You will see these lines as orange, and you will see them with a number, like plus or minus something or other. Whenever you see constraints or these configurations that are orange, it's telling you that something is amiss. And what it's telling us in this situation is that, let's see if we can actually get it to tell us this explicitly. So if you hit Command B to build, which is an abbreviated version of run, it's basically saying, Xcode, please compile my project and check to make sure that I'm doing everything correctly. And Xcode, in doing so, is either going to flag warnings, things that you're doing wrong, like straight up that it can't proceed beyond, or it's going to flag warnings, so errors and warnings. And warnings, it'll still run, but you might see some unexpected behavior. It's giving us a warning here. If you click on this little guy, the issue navigator, when you do product build, let's do that one more time, or Command B, it will build or compile your project. And we see build succeeded, but it's going to show us all the warnings or errors relevant for what it's doing. And it's saying the frame for table view will be different at runtime. So it's basically saying in the interface builder file on the canvas, this thing is pretty small. But if I were to apply the constraints that you asked me to make it hug the top, left, right, and bottom of the super view, it's going to look different. The frame is going to be different. So we can bring those things in sync, basically make the view configuration in our canvas here look like what it will look like when the constraints are applied by clicking on the right-hand button. Let's see if we can get a tooltip here. Resolve auto layout issues. It's pretty self-explanatory. And we go to selected views section. We say update frames. It's going to change the frame to respect the constraints that we wish to apply to it. And you can see, indeed, the table view fills the space, which is exactly what we wanted. So let's run. Actually, why don't we build one more time? Product build. no more warning. That means that, it basically took care of the issue for us, which is great. Let's run now and see what happens. Something is different. We have a scrolling list view, okay? That's a great thing. This is actually, we're probably almost out of time. Okay, 10 minutes. We're going to cut it off. Next time, we're going to figure out how to actually manipulate this guy in code, or at least connect the table view that we've set up in the interface builder file to our Swift file. Cool. See you then.